What if I told you that you can take absolutely spectacular landscape photography images with very little gear? It might be hard to believe considering the most popular content on things like YouTube are cameras, gear, and lenses. Heck, you're kind of watching a gear video right now, ironically. But those videos can send the wrong message to new photographers that you need a bunch of expensive equipment to take really nice images. You don't, and I'm going to prove it to you in this video. So if you're trying to figure out what camera to buy, or you're just trying to figure out the focal length that you want to shoot at, or maybe you just have questions about tripods, filters, or those kind of accessories, we're going to cover it all in this video. And by the end of the video, you're going to be absolutely blown away by what you can get with very little in landscape photography. Let's dive in. Well, good morning everyone to the beautiful country of Slovenia. Not that you could tell where I am. This is currently our sunrise situation. And you're going to notice that I'm going to be shooting photos and making landscape images throughout this video. But the point of this video is to talk about how little you actually need to take landscape images like this one. Well, just imagine there's some nice mountains in the background and a church on a hill and some beautiful stuff. Maybe the fog will roll off by the time I'm finished talking. But this video is actually inspired by this trip that I'm on right now and a trip that I took about 6 years ago in 2018, where I only brought stuff that I could carry onto my flight, including my clothes. And I was gone for more than a month. The trip that I'm on right now is going to be more than a month. So that means that I have to minimize down my camera gear to basically the essentials. What can I get away with at the very minimal? And that trip in 2018 really taught me, and pretty much my entire portfolio has been taken only on one camera and 2 lenses. Now, I do have a wildlife lens that I use from time to time, but the reality is pretty much all of my work can be simplified down into essentially a 16-35 lens, a 70-200, and a camera. And I think it's important for me to mention that if you're new to this channel and you've never seen me before, I am definitely a minimalist. I live in my car. I have lived in my car for the last 3 years. So everything I could possibly want or own or need is in a very small space. So I need to tell you this because if you're watching and you like stuff, you like gear, you like having options for lenses and bags and cameras and accessories, that's okay. This is not meant to tell you that you're wrong and I'm right for shooting with very little. The importance here is that, like I said in the intro, we are inundated with the fact that gear is super important. It's the most consumed type of media on things like YouTube, or we're talking about gear in this very video. And I don't want people to think that you need a bunch of stuff to take amazing landscape images. If anything, landscape is probably the easiest accessible photography genre, in my opinion, to get into. So the first question you might be asking yourself is, what camera do you need? Well, you don't even need a camera. You can actually take some incredible photos with just your phone. If you've seen any videos on my channel, I talk about comparing my phone to my camera every year, and I come away with some pretty incredible results. Just yesterday, for sunset, I took this image on my phone that I haven't even edited yet, but it looks like it was going to come out really well. That just shows you the sheer power of the cameras that we have in our pocket. But if you're looking to upgrade and move on from a phone, I definitely understand that, because our relationship with our camera and how much we enjoy using it is very important. And using a phone, not exactly the most enjoyable photography experience. So, deciding on what camera brand you want. My personal opinion is your camera brand doesn't matter. And I'll prove it to you right now. As I put these images on the screen, I guarantee you that you cannot tell what any of these images were taken with. You can't guess that the color science in this image or the blues in this image were taken with this camera. You just can't. And that is a very important lesson, is that the images that you see, the images that you consume, you never really care or know what camera they were taken on. We only care about what cameras things were taken on from a consumerist standpoint, from a gear standpoint. But the reality is, when you make images, all that really matters is that the images you're taking are good. Doesn't matter what you're capturing it on. So my personal opinion when it comes to deciding on a camera is to go and hold them in your hand. Go and use them. Get a camera that feels good to you. That's absolutely the most important thing, because if you get a camera that you don't enjoy using, you're not going to go out there and take beautiful landscape images like the one you see behind me. And that's exactly how I picked my very first camera. I went to the store, I held the Canon in my hand, I held the Nikon in my hand. I liked the menus and the ergonomics of the Canon, and I've been a Canon shooter ever since. For the most part, I just enjoy using the camera, and the stats and all that stuff are mostly irrelevant for how good the image quality is or in my final images. I cannot stress enough how important it is that you just enjoy using your camera. So going and trying one, just holding it, is really, really important. And if you can't get access to that, maybe take a road trip to go get one, or maybe rent one, or maybe you have a friend or two that has different types of cameras that you can try out and hold in your hand. But that to me is the most important thing. It's not a stat sheet. It's not what brand is the best brand. It's realistically what works for you and what is going to be what you enjoy using. Sadly, I didn't get to enjoy using my camera that morning because the fog never cleared, but after driving higher up, we finally broke that fog layer, and it was time to take some images. All right, 3.5 hours later, and we've made it to Lake Bled. How does the view?
Very pretty.
You know, there's an island over there with a church on it.
I can barely tell.
Have you seen the castle?
No, and I don't think I will today.
Yeah, so we drove over here and we actually got out of the fog layer and captured a couple really great images, but the whole plan was to come here and film more of this video and take some photos. But when you're at Lake Bled to take photos of Lake Bled, you kind of want to be able to see Lake Bled. So,
well, you can see the lake, you just can't see anything else.
This is true. Nothing else.
Nothing.
All right, so even though this shoot was a bust, we still got to talk about things like sensor size and if you want to buy new or used cameras. So let's just jump into that now, hopefully somewhere a little bit less foggy. You were saying I should stop my time lapse?
Yeah.
Why?
So you can shoot the colors.
What colors?
Over there.
Yeah.
Over there. Look, the mountains are purple.
Yeah, but what would be my foreground? It's all in shadow.
They're so pretty. I can be your foreground.
But you just said I had to... How do you want me to get both?
Well, you zoom in.
Yeah, but then you would just be blurry.
It'd just be my fingers.
Oh my God. This is what I have to deal with.
Excuse me? Say that again?
She's great. This is what I have to deal with. She's great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if you couldn't already tell from Sophie and I joking around, we finally made it out of the fog. As long as you come up to the mountains up here in Slovenia, you can get out of the fog. You can actually see it right here. And we've come to one of the famous churches here in Slovenia. It's absolutely beautiful. The only trouble part, or the hard part, was if you could tell when we came in, that footage is all of this was in shadow and you had some nice colors in the background. That is because this is better as a sunrise spot rather than a sunset spot, which is what I tried to shoot this morning. Not exactly this church, but as you remember, it was fogged in. However, what I did is I actually utilized trying to shoot and make work with some of this clouded version shapes and negative space like that, and just did my best to work with it rather than trying to photograph this church with the mountains in the background. Although right now it's looking pretty dang good. Before I take a few more shots of that, I wanted to talk about two things that are important when deciding on choosing a camera. You're gonna encounter questions of things like what sensor size you need for your new camera. The reality is I'm gonna keep it really short. It doesn't matter. Sensor size is not gonna make a huge difference when it comes to the image quality of the photos you're taking. You're gonna run into things like micro four thirds, APS-C, full frame, and even medium format, but don't worry about that one. And the reality is cameras are really good now. It doesn't matter. I shoot on an APS-C sensor camera all the time for my work. I had a guy in a workshop with the new OM system shooting on micro four thirds. I have colleagues trying out micro four thirds cameras. They take great images. It really doesn't matter. The two things to keep in mind when it comes to sensor size is that if you're shooting astro, you typically want a larger sensor, but I still don't think it matters all that much. Even with the smaller sensors now, they take great astro images. The second thing is depth of field. The larger the sensor size, the shallower depth of field it's gonna have. But typically that doesn't really matter in landscape photography, which we'll talk about when we talk about lenses, because we usually just want everything in focus. So, short answer is, I promise you the sensor size just genuinely doesn't matter. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, should you buy new or used? The reality is that's gonna depend on your budget and the type of person you are. Maybe you wanna buy new and have a manufacturer's warranty, but you can get some really, really great cameras used. So I'm gonna actually have a document linked down below for all of my suggestions based off of brand and budget, what I think you should get, depending on where you are. If you want to buy new, maybe under $1,000 for these cameras. If you want to buy used for under $1,000, maybe these cameras. All of that's going to be in the document down below if you're interested in that. But to give you a few examples, this camera right here is a Canon R5. It basically takes the same image quality as my old 5D Mark IV. When I did my Canon R5 initial video on it years ago, I said that the image quality is essentially the same. There's a lot of different features in this for video and autofocus and all that stuff, but when it comes to image quality, the 5D Mark IV, basically identical to this one. And that camera is 8 or 9 years old at this point, and you can get them for less than $1,000, which is honestly pretty impressive. Courtney Victoria, a colleague of mine that makes YouTube videos and about landscape photography like this, still uses a Nikon D850 for her videos. Even though she gets lent brand new mirrorless cameras all the time to try out, she still uses a Nikon D850 and a Nikon D750 because it does everything she wants it to in terms of image quality. You don't need a brand new camera to take great images. In the last 10 years, basically every camera that's being made takes great images. I also think that if you want to buy new because you want to buy into something new, that's also okay. The biggest caveat here that I want to point out is that if you do buy a used camera, Sony has a little bit of a step up because they've been mirrorless this entire time, whereas most used cameras for both Nikon and Canon are going to be old DSLRs where you can get older lenses that are going to be cheaper, which we'll talk about. But those lenses in that system that you buy into, you'll have to either use an adapter or upgrade later if you continue on your journey into the mirrorless realm later on. So there is a bonus for Sony, but I still think that the best recommendation I can make is get the camera that fits right in your hand and has the menu systems that you enjoy using. To summarize this entire thing into the most important sentence I can probably tell you is to realize that all of the photos that have inspired you to get into landscape photography, all the people you might follow right now, or the photos that you see of mine or anyone else that you follow, were likely taken on cameras that were not made in the last couple years. That should prove to you that you really don't need a new camera to take amazing images. You could easily buy a used camera and start taking fantastic images like all the ones that have inspired you to get into landscape photography. So next up, we're going to talk about lenses. I'm going to take a few more photos of this and show the ones to you that I like the most. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here. And if you're enjoying this, make sure to give the video a like or subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Man, that's a pretty church. Oh, the bells are going off. How convenient. In landscape photography, one of the best elements to have in your shots typically is fog. It kind of adds a layer of depth, mystery, separation between your subjects. But currently I have been experiencing, well, too much fog. Good morning, everyone. We are back at the spot we were at yesterday for sunrise. And the good news is we have some visibility. You can actually see that there's some trees here. And every once in a while, the church that's back here will poke out just ever so slightly. But I've been here for about an hour past sunrise, almost an hour and a half at this point, just kind of waiting to see if it'll roll away. And, well, no, it's just been this the entire time. So I'm probably gonna wait around a little bit longer, but for now, while I wait, let's talk lenses. Lenses are gonna be the next subject matter of when, after you buy a camera, you're gonna have to decide on what lens to get. And the first question you're gonna be asking yourself or run into is, what focal length should I get? And the best advice I have for that is to go and look at all the photographers that inspire you. The photographers that made you want to start looking into getting into landscape photography. Look at the images that they're taking. Look at these images from Nick Page or Mark Adamus or Ryan Dyer. All of them are pretty much going to be super wide angle shots. Maybe that's the type of photography you're into, and that should probably be the type of lens you get, something that's super wide angle. Or maybe look at some of these photos from Sarah Marino or Bree Stockwell or Michelle Sons. All of these are a bit more intimate, maybe a little bit of a closer focal length. Or you can look at these images from me or me again, and maybe these are going to tell you that you want more of a telephoto focal length. The reality is, most of the time when you're getting into landscape photography, people are probably going to suggest get something wide, because when people think of landscape photography, they think of something like this, a big, wide shot. However, a lot of photos, a lot of nature photos, a lot of photography that people shoot as landscape photographers are not shot with wide angles. It just depends on the type of shooter you are. So a best place to start, look at who inspires you, see the images that inspire you, and go from there. And if after looking at all of those photographers that inspire you and you still don't have a direct answer, the best thing to do is just get a middle ground lens, something like a 24 to 105, 28 to 70, something in that range. And then as you shoot, you can start to find out, oh, I'm shooting wider than I expected, or I'm shooting more zoomed in than I expected. And the best thing is that particular lens will probably remain in your kit for the next 10 years, depending on how far you go in landscape photography. So it's not a bad lens to even start out with, and it'll give you the answer of what focal lengths you typically like to shoot at. Now, the next thing is, I've said before, we are very spoiled with current lens technology. I was watching a video Nigel Danson just released of a 28 to 400 lens for his Nikon kit, which is mind-blowing. I believe Mads uses a 24 or 28 to 200 lens on his Sony kit from Tamron. An absolutely fantastic lens, and these are all people that are using or trying out these lenses in a professional sense. That means that these lenses are going to be good enough to take professional quality images. And those ranges are absolutely wild. I mean, that basically gives you the entire range. I mean, 28 to 200 is absurd. That's a super wide range. 28 to 400 is even bigger. So currently we are pretty spoiled when it comes to lens options. You don't even have to necessarily choose a focal length that suits you. You can just get something that almost covers everything and just start with that. I think that's a great place to be. Okay, before I talk apertures, I just wanted to point out that you could almost see the church over here somewhere. Well, maybe you can see it, but there is a church there, I promise. I'm not just making it up. But anyways, you're gonna run into things like variable aperture, or you're gonna notice that lenses get more and more expensive with wider apertures, and that's typically because wider apertures like 2.8, 1.8, stuff like that, they need much larger diameter of glass, typically making them heavier, bigger, and more expensive. The reality is, like I said before, landscape photography is good to get into in terms of budget because it's actually one of the most accessible. We don't need those really big apertures for the majority of the work that we do. Now, I can't tell you how to shoot your photos, or I can't tell you that maybe you're someone that wants to get in landscape photography, but also dabble into shooting some portraiture and stuff like that. And then maybe wider apertures are something you want to prioritize. But when it strictly comes to landscape photography, using a wide aperture like 2.8 or anything like that is mostly irrelevant. So we can get away with buying cheaper, lighter lenses. I personally switched to an f2.8 70-200 to an f4 2.8 because it's half the size and half the weight, and I would never go back. So if you're seeing lenses that have variable apertures like 4.5 to 7.1 and you're reading reviews that people are complaining about the aperture being variable or anything like that, the reality is it really doesn't matter in landscape photography all that much. Now, the last thing you're going to run into is primes versus zooms. And I'm not typically someone as an educator or a photographer that gives the advice of basically absolutes or tells people what to do, because everyone has different needs, different wants, and different things in their life. But specifically on this subject, I am a huge proponent of buying zooms, if that's not obvious based on what I've told you already. Especially if you're new to photography and you don't know what focal range you wanted, like we discussed. But more importantly, a lot of the times with primes, you're spending extra money on that extra glass because they have wider apertures. And as I said before, we don't really need wider apertures. And a lot of the times when it comes to developing your compositions, finding what you're trying to shoot and stuff like that, having the versatility of having a zoom is far more important. A lot of the times, you can't necessarily get closer to your subject. The one caveat to this that I will say, if you do want a prime lens, just because it's more portable and it's small, like on the X100VI has that 35mm built-in fixed lens to make it more compact and more light, that can be a lot of fun. I would not tell you not to do that. Again, it's all about what you want and what you need. But in general, I highly recommend zoom lenses. They're gonna give you the most versatility. And honestly, you're probably gonna end up seeing that most landscape photographers shoot with zoom lenses, not necessarily primes, unless it's astrophotography. But that's a whole different genre. All right, so my ears are absolutely freezing. The fog is not rolling away. So I'm gonna get back to the car, start my day, and hopefully you'll see me again with some sunshine or a little bit less fog at the least. For now, I'm gonna show you a few images at different focal lengths from throughout my career that might help answer a question or two about what focal length you might be interested in starting out with. And then we're going to talk about things like tripods, accessories, filters, bags, all of that stuff just in a second, and hopefully during a shoot where I actually take some photos with some light. Wish me luck. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here. All right, we've come up to this absolutely incredible spot here. I mean, just look at this. The people are probably wondering, where have you been? Where were you this morning?
I was sleeping in.
Oh, yeah, well, you won that one because there was nothing, literally nothing. I spent 4 hours and got nothing.
Nothing, huh?
So maybe I should have slept in. So I'm going to keep taking a few shots of these layered mountains, layered hills here, and see what we can come up with. And we're going to talk about some tripods. You want to talk about tripods?
Yes.
All right, I framed up this absolutely beautiful shot here in the Slovenian Alps. You could see all of the haze in the atmosphere in my shot, but I'm actually using that to my advantage, and I'm having this little tree right in the center of my image, and it's kind of bringing everything together, and you can see all the shapes on the mountains in the background, and then in the right part of the corner, you can see that little touch of light hitting that hillside, and I think it's really important, otherwise that entire area would be in shadow, and it's kind of bringing everything together. But this is an absolutely gorgeous scene that I just had to tell you about so I can show you the photo. And now we can talk tripods, but man, is it absolutely gorgeous out here right now. And it just feels good to stand in the sun. Here's the shot. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. Ah, beautiful. Goodness, being out in the sunshine felt great, but being in this shade right now, it is freezing cold. And of course, I'm currently wearing flip-flops. If you're a viewer of this channel, you probably already know, but that means that I'm gonna get through this pretty quickly. So let's talk tripods. The first thing I wanna say is you do not need a tripod to start landscape photography. Don't let yourself or hinder yourself from starting because you don't have a tripod yet. Honestly, there's quite a few photographers out there that don't like using tripods, that they try to use them as little as possible. And as you've been watching, I haven't used one for a lot of the shots that I've been taking. Now, there are times where using a tripod will be required. Whether you're shooting long exposures of things like waterfalls or seascapes, or using ND filters, or you're shooting that area between sunset and blue hour and the light is fading and you still want to get some of that nice alpine or afterglow from the sunset, you're going to probably need a tripod. The other times you're going to need a tripod is that if you do end up buying a used or older camera, a lot of the times, while the image quality of those cameras is great, they're not going to have as good as image stabilization or in-body stabilization. So that just means that you're going to have to use a tripod because you can't get away with hand holding a lot of your shots as much. That'll be up to whatever you end up deciding. But my point is, you don't need a tripod to shoot landscape or nature photography. I know quite a few people that try to avoid them at all costs. But when you do end up getting a tripod, or you get to the point where you want one, my best suggestion is to buy a used tripod. Go on Facebook Marketplace. I was doing this recently just for researching this video and found some absolutely fantastic deals. A lot of the times people buy tripods and they use them in the studio or they don't use them at all, and they're in pretty pristine condition. I would not even try to sell this tripod to anyone because that would be cruel and unusual punishment. But I saw a lot of great deals on there. You don't need to spend $500 on a tripod. You don't need to spend $1,000 on a tripod. Actually, come to think of it, all the tripods that I use, I bought new for under $200. This tripod I bought recently, well, not this specific one, The brother of this one, this exact model, I bought for under $180 recently because it goes on super sale via B&H sometimes, which, by the way, if you're interested, sign up for my newsletter. I'm going to be sending out random newsletters of deals like that when they come up so that people can get them, because I think they're absolutely amazing. So make sure you sign up for that if you want to. One last thing about tripods is do not buy one of the cheap plastic tripods. Don't get a $30 tripod. It's just going to get in your way. Honestly, it's bad for the environment because you're going to end up getting it and just want to throw it away immediately. So 2 things about tripods: you don't need one to start, but if you do, try to buy used or find a really good deal, signing up by a newsletter, or like I said, I'm going to have recommendations for tripods in that document down below, so make sure you check that out as well. Now, the biggest accessory I think is the most important for landscape photographers is actually not a tripod. I would suggest getting a polarizing filter before you get a tripod. The shots you just saw me taking, I needed this polarizing filter. The ones I use are magnetic. To me, they're the easiest to use. I use a brand called Maven. Again, I will have it linked down below. This is my favorite brand. I love what the company stands for, and they've treated me well over the years. And I also have their filter kit here with a 3-stop, 6-stop, and 10-stop ND. You don't need this. I rarely use this, but I do have special needs for it when I am shooting moving water or long exposures, but this is not something you need to worry about right now. The only filter I think you need to worry about is a polarizer. You can get away without one, but I guarantee you, you're gonna want one eventually, and I would prioritize getting this over a tripod. The other filter you might want to try to look into that I get for all of my cameras is going to be a splash guard, or they're typically called UV filters. And all they are is just a piece of glass that goes in front of your lens and basically protects it kind of like a screen protector. The thing is, you don't want to go super cheap because you could be spending a decent amount of money on a lens, and you don't want to put a really cheap piece of glass on the front of your lens and then ruin all your images, but you also don't need to go super expensive. You don't need a $200 piece of clear glass. You could probably get away with $30 to $50. Again, I'll have recommendations down below. And what that's going to do is if you ever drop your camera and it lands face first onto the front element, you're not going to crack your front element. You're just going to break that filter that's only about $50 rather than your entire lens. Or just daily use of wiping it, getting water on it, dust, cleaning this front element all of the time means I could scratch it up, or I could use my shirt and not worry about it. Whereas if I'm cleaning the actual front element of the lens, I want to touch that as little as possible. So a nice UV filter, about $30 to $50, is a great recommendation. Another small accessory you're going to want: extra batteries, but you don't need to get branded batteries like these. You can actually get off-brand batteries. I shoot with those all the time. And more importantly, and even really cool, is the newest ones all come with USB-C charging directly in the battery. That means that if your camera doesn't support USB-C charging, you can charge it through the battery, or if you forget your battery charger, it's right on the battery. Super cool. Have those linked down below as well. Last but not least, camera bags. This is a big one. Everyone has different opinions on camera bags. My personal opinion is it's all going to depend on what you need or what you want. You can get like a messenger bag style, a big backpack, a hiking bag. Again, a lot of people buy a lot of bags and then don't end up using the majority of them. The biggest thing is if you're just camera and a lens, don't even worry about it yet. Just get a lens strap, put your camera on there. You don't even need a bag. But my biggest recommendation is if you're into hiking or you're into landscape photography and you're going to be moving around a lot, just get a camera insert for your current bag that you already have. Personally speaking, the most comfortable bag that I have for landscape photography is not a photography bag. It is my hiking bag that I just put this camera insert into, and this is all I brought on this entire trip. This is pretty much, actually, I could fit what I've shot my entire portfolio on in this bag pretty easily. And that means that I can change bags up. If I have a smaller bag, this can go in it. If I have a larger bag that I need more stuff in, this can also go in it. Shimoda sells them, F-Stop Gear sells them. Actually, Osprey just started releasing them at the time of making this video. That's my personal opinion. Get a camera insert, move it around, and grow with it. And it'll always be functional because you can use that camera insert in different bags rather than getting a bag that just fits everything. However, if you don't want to end up doing that, you don't want to just use one of your bags you already have, or maybe you don't have a hiking bag, the best suggestion, again, Facebook Marketplace, buying used. Like I said, a lot of people buy bags and they don't end up using them. And I was just doing some research for this video and I found a ton of basically unused bags for almost half price through that. And I think that's a great way to not end up consuming more and basically recycling something that someone else didn't want, ended up getting yourself a really good deal. There's a lot of great bags out there. I'll have a few listed in the document, but probably not going to focus too much on bags because I think that's more of a personal preference to you. I will have some inserts listed because I think that that's my best suggestion when it comes to camera bags. All right, so that pretty much covers 95% of all the accessories you could ever want for landscape photography. And the next step is, well, once you have a camera and a lens, is probably learning photography. Whether that's learning the best settings for your camera to take amazing images, or learning how to take landscape images like you've seen me take, or editing photos in Lightroom or Photoshop. Well, you can learn all of that and much more with today's sponsor, Skillshare. Recently, I found myself writing a lot more narratives for this channel, and as someone who went to college for engineering and math, the last thing I ever thought I'd be doing in my daily life was writing. So I've been spending a lot of time learning about better techniques to generate creativity and foundational skills for good storytelling through Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you take your career skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustles to the next level. If you're new to photography and want a step-by-step guide to understanding the basics, Sean Dalton's Photography Essentials class covers it all. What about a 9-hour course on everything you could possibly want to know about Lightroom that even includes project files to follow along with? Adobe certified trainer Daniel Scott's class is incredibly in-depth. Or maybe you want an in-depth guide to editing your landscape images like Daniel Gastiger's class. There are classes and resources for all levels, plus endless opportunities to learn new skills or hobbies you might be interested in. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive 1 month free trial of Skillshare, so get started today. Thank you for watching, thank you for tuning into this video, and if you stick around to when I'm done talking, there's going to be some before and after raws from the images from throughout this video. Thanks for being here. There's got to be a rainbow out there somewhere. We just got to go find them. Later. And we're going to talk about some tripods. You want to talk about tripods?
Yes.